So, same way like we discussed excavation, so after 1.2 meter or 4 feet, it would be considered like a confined space. So, in that scenario, we have to follow, first of all, again the same procedure to identify all the hazards because it's a confined space and what kind of hazards can be there. And before even to discuss about the hazards, we can really understand, what is a confined space actually. And look at the picture, like what are the
I think this
examples of
is
confined space. Like I mentioned earlier, any space which is not designed for human occupancy or have limited exit or entry, and on the other side a terrible kind of toxic hazards gonna be there, toxic gases in other words. So a place where we can't live, we can't eat, drink, or even smoke, by the way. So it's a danger, kind of a red line or danger zone. Examples could be manholes, excavated area deeper than 1.2 meter or 4 feet. Plenty of other examples could be tanks, vessels, you know, wall boxes, and plenty of other elements are involved. Now, what hazards can be there? Maybe lack of oxygen.
normal oxygen inside,
And
or oxygen, little
yeah,
oxygen inside this
exactly.
tranche.
So normal range 19.5% to 23.5%. It's a normal range. 19.5% minimum and maximum 23.5%. Less than 19.5% is a hazard. We need to use SCABA, self-contained breathing apparatus, because it's not acceptable to send our people without respiratory equipment actually. And if it is 23.5, above than 23.5%, no work.
Oh,
Otherwise, it would create kind of a fire incident or maybe explosion sometime. And less oxygen, we already discussed in the previously also that oxygen is our first requirement as a human. And then if we talk about within the same confined space, which is our next topic also, the H2S, like hydrogen sulfide gas. In some cases, we're going to say below 10 ppm, it's acceptable to work for 8 hours. But 10 to 20 ppm, if we are still bound to work, then make sure you have SCABA, you have some respiratory equipment, or maybe SABA, supplied air breathing apparatus. Or we also gonna make sure the permit is there. We gonna make sure that people are trained. Proper standby man is there. Confined space entry supervisor must also be available. A close supervision sometimes we prefer should be done by the safety leaders or safety officers. Poor lighting, mechanical hazards, electrical hazards, slip, trips and fall. Several other hazards could be there because it's a confined space, it's a danger zone, right? And a lot of, sometimes I say, we don't need so many safety officers and work permit receivers and managers and all that if we don't have such kind of restricted areas or danger zones or confined spaces. Because managing these spaces is one of the a typical activity actually. It's not an easy job at all. A complete plan we require, expert teams we need, proper training and certification we need to ensure, a right set of toolbox meetings and the topics need to be discussed. Everybody have to be capable to identify hazards. Proactively, they must be familiar how to ensure proper controls. So before, during and after, all regulations related to confined space activities and the value of confined space permit, hot work permit, cold work permit and plenty of other things need to be taken care actually. Especially the rescue team and the equipment must also be available. Okay, so I'm sure you would have got the idea how the confined spaces have to be taken seriously, and there must be a deep plan to identify the hazards and put some controls proactively before even you start your any activity or process or any project within confined spaces. Because I'm sure within your construction industry, many workplaces you will see containing such kind of areas which you can consider confined spaces, even though they are not necessarily designed for people, but they are large enough for workers to enter and perform certain activities, and our people have to go inside for sure to perform different activities actually. And as I mentioned, a confined space means has limited or restricted means of entry or exit, and bear in mind it's not designed for continuous human occupancy. And examples, I would appreciate if you can remember some of the examples like tanks, vessels, storage bins could be there, hoopers can be there, vaults, pits, manholes, tunnels, even some equipment you can find in that way, some pipelines, duct work. That is why it is required as per even OSHA, the permit must be there. Without permit, nobody is authorized to go inside. It's a legal violation as well. And especially when we talk about oil and gas industry or construction industry, of course, you will find manholes, you will find crawl spaces or even tanks, That's why in USA, OSHA is a great help because they are helping all the business community and employers to guiding them, with their regulations, how to tackle their projects, especially within confined spaces, and to keep their construction workers safe, first of all, if they are going inside and performing some activities as per your project plans, So I hope this would have give you plenty of ideas. It's a very pretty straightforward understanding. First job is to identify the hazards. Second job is make sure you implement proactively a detailed controls, and there must be a CSE plan. There must be a work permit system, well implemented. Make sure you have standby man. Make sure you have CSE supervisor. Make sure you have authorized gas tester, and he is quite familiar when to conduct gas testing. Before first entry, after the breaks, whenever the conditions are changed and you are going to re-enter, or sometimes the continuous monitoring as per nature of your project actually. Now, have you ever heard the word carbon monoxide? And what is PEL, permissible exposure limit? Carbon monoxide, Have you ever noticed when we use diesel and petrol and we burn them by using in generators or in several machinery or even our cars, our vehicles, when diesel and petrol burns, it creates what? So you can have some further study and research on carbon monoxide because it's another deadly monsters, because especially after 35 ppm and 35 to 1000 ppm you don't work with your scrubber, and above then 1000 ppm, you don't allow anyone to work, especially in confined spaces, you know. Same way, we can discuss LEL, you know, lower explosive limit, and what is the permissible exposure limit of LEL. First of all, what is LEL stands for? Like we call it lower explosive limit, and there must be like UEL also, upper explosive limit. That is why we need a gas tester to tell us what is LEL within that particular confined space. And this LEL, one important rule we truly have to remember: whenever there is a hot work in a confined space, LEL ideally must be 0%, even have to be 0% all the time. Above than 0% LEL, no hot work is allowed. This is a very straightforward rule which we truly have to remember. Above 0% LEL, lower explosive limit, no hot work in a confined space. And 0 to or below 5% LEL, we can do cold work even without scrub at some level, but 5% to 10% LEL, we need scrubber. We need to make sure, you know, the right set of precautions are there, and even certain permissions also we need to get according to our system actually. Now, why I am talking all these permissible exposure limits? Because the authorized gas tester, he will tell immediately this is LEL percentage, this is the level of oxygen, this is the level of H2S or some other toxic gases, you know. But what if according to the gas testing results, we are not forming up and following safety regulations? Like if LEL is 10% or above, then it's terrible if you are allowing people to work, even the cold work, you know. Even the cold work is not allowed above 10% LEL. Same way carbon monoxide, above 35 ppm to 1000 ppm without scrubber is not allowed. Above than 1000 or 1000 ppm, even no work. Same way H2S, below 10 ppm, we can allow people to work for 8 hours. And sometime, you know, 1 ppm, especially in Saudi Aramco, they don't allow, you know, because might be they're gonna think this could be a accelerating point, you know, just a starting point, and later on this H2S level could be increased drastically, God forbid, and it's a deadly monster. It can kill within seconds, so they don't want to compromise. That is why below 10 ppm we can work for 8 hours, but 10 ppm to 20 ppm without scrubber, without respiratory equipment is not allowed, and 20 ppm onward, no entry. Especially, you know, 100 ppm is also ideal at immediately dangerous to life and health. We are talking about H2S. And even if we talk about LEL of H2S, like 4.3% is LEL of H2S, and 46% UEL of H2S. That means this is lower explosive limit and upper explosive limit. So in between, anything can happen, you know, more chances of fire hazard or explosion. And one of the deadly hazard in oil and gas industry especially, or in confined spaces, is explosion, or is a terrible fire hazard also. If we ignore gas testing results, you know, that is why I encourage mostly to the companies, make sure you have competent authorized gas tester who must be capable to conduct gas testing, and make sure he will tell us all the readings. What is the oxygen level? What is the level of H2S, LEL and carbon monoxide? At least these four. Rest of the toxic gases, of course, according to the ideal edge, we can still make sure, you know, they are also not creating any problem for our employees or workers, you know. But these four should never be compromised. I repeat again, the level of oxygen, it's important to know, then level of carbon monoxide, level of LEN, and of course H2S. These four elements must be tested by authorized gas tester. Then accordingly we'll follow safety rules, and we can bring down the probability of accidents or fatalities, God forbid. So I hope this would have give you some reason to think technically how things have to move on, and why all these safety SOPs are important to follow actually.